The first year of the Sega Saturn in North America had been filled with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. We had felt the exhilaration of flying an armored dragon through a futuristic world. We had rounded the corners of Sega Rally's tracks, barely holding on to enough grip to stay on the road. We beat down foe after foe in the high-res 60 frames per second masterpiece that was Virtua Fighter 2. We braved the underbelly of Virtua City and brought down an evil cabal of terrorists hell-bent on its destruction. But for all those grand adventures, there was an equally awful experience that had the opposite effect. There was Robotica, the soulless first-person shooter that had you wandering around the same feeling levels with unexciting enemies. We got to walk around in a boring mech action game called Ghen War, with its unimpressive visuals and tiresome combat. Blackfire was a helicopter combat title with empty environments, poor control, and absolutely no excitement at all. Among that roller coaster of software experiences, there came a game based on the 1995 movie Congo, which itself was based on a book from 1980. Congo, the Lost City of Zinj, was released in early 1996 and developed by Jumping Jack Software and Sega Away Team. It was meant to be a blockbuster movie tie-in, but the film wasn't well received, and the game was 9 months late. As you can imagine, that was a recipe for disaster, and in this episode, we are going to find out just how good, or bad, this game actually was. No holds barred and no language censored in this one, so you might want to send away the kiddos. I hope you guys enjoy my review of Congo, the Lost City of Zinj, for your Sega Saturn. Our story here follows the survivor of a doomed expedition to collect loads of diamonds. As you try and survive, you send updates in the form of video diaries to the company you work for, Travacom. Staying in contact with these folks is important because they will airdrop you extra supplies if you find all the diamonds in each stage. Gameplay is straight up tried and true first-person shooter. While there are missions like switches, finding items, and dealing with some light puzzle elements, the vast majority of the time you are shooting and killing things. These creatures start small like spiders, lizards, and snakes, but soon grow to troublesome traps, voodoo totems, gorillas, and massive bosses. Fortunately, you get some nasty weapons to fell these adversaries. There's the trusty pistol, a shotgun, machine gun, missile launcher, and of course your mega weapon, the phasic laser. The ammo for these tools of war are spread all over the stages, and you'll want to keep a watch for it, because you are gonna need it. Combat has a few moves beyond pulling a trigger to help you stay alive. There is a strafing mechanic with the L and R shoulder buttons, a quick 180 turnaround with the X button, and you can quickly select different weapons with Y. You can also jump, run, crouch, and span the camera up and down to see better. There are only 4 stage types you'll face while doing all that moving and fighting. The jungle makes up the beginning of the game, and then you'll move on to the ruins, the city of Zinj itself, and finally the catacombs. The different types of ammo aren't the only items you'll find in these stages. Keep your eyes peeled for health, diamonds, extra lives, and antidotes. Your health is represented on the left-hand side of the screen by the heart monitor. The higher the waveform, the healthier you are. Unfortunately, health packs are one use and you can't save it for later. Your ammo count and minimap are also at the bottom of the screen. You can hit start and pause the game to see a much larger map that fills in as you explore. There is a save system in place, but it's tied entirely to the number of lives you have. You start with 2 and can continue immediately from where you died. Run out of lives, however, for that save file, and it's game over no matter how far you've gotten. Congo for the Saturn is a very poor looking and running game. Artistically, the enemy sprites look ridiculous with comically exaggerated features and jittery animations. To make matters worse, half the enemies are stationary totems and statues that seem like cop-outs for any real effort at decent enemy design. Many of the boss encounters suffer the same. I could have lived with all of that had the stages themselves provided a nice visual presentation, but that falters even worse than the sprite work. The jungle you start out in is so dense and in your face, it's incredibly difficult to navigate. Everything looks the same with no real variation in terrain or markers to know where you are or where you should be going. You'll get turned around often and have to look at the map constantly in a lot of the areas, more so than just about any first-person shooter I played from that era. This sameness extends to the other stages as well, and gives the entire thing a feeling of constantly seeing the same pathways over and over with little deviation. Performance is also a big letdown. It's never really smooth, but there are times when it drops to a slideshow, particularly if the stage opens up to a large clearing. I ran into parts of the catacombs that were so bad it had to be single digits, making combat and platforming a real chore. Even at its best, I described the entire graphics engine as ugly, sluggish, and just not something you wanted to see for a 1996 release. Especially one that was published by Sega themselves. Had this been launched with the US Saturn in May of 1995, you could at least excuse it for some of this. But this came months after Sega Rally, Virtua Fighter 2, and Virtua Cop, and we all knew the Saturn was capable of so much more. The only thing I can halfway compliment about its visuals are the full motion video cinematics, which by Saturn standards aren't awful. The sound design here gets the job done, but I wasn't impressed with the stage music at all. It's a mix of low-key drum work and environmental noises that fits the theme, but does absolutely nothing for the emotional elements of the combat and your motivations for being there. Here is a quick example. Good God, where do I start with my problems with this huge steaming pile of absolute shit? I complained about the visuals already, so let's focus on the biggest list of sins: the stage design, continue system, and combat. Right from the moment things begin, you are treated to some of the worst decisions a developer can make when choosing how to challenge its audience. They already had stages that were difficult to navigate, so they make it worse by giving the player fevers and poisonings that disrupt their vision and gameplay. Yep, get hit by some enemies like snakes and the control completely reverses on you, making an already bad experience even more frustrating. Enemies come out of nowhere constantly, making combat cumbersome and damage a thing that's not easily avoided. This may be realistic considering the environment, but in execution, a fun time it is not. I also was blown away by the ridiculous save and continue system, or should I say, the lack thereof. You start out with 2 lives in reserve, which are essentially continues. You can indeed choose not to use one of these lives upon a death, and the game will save your progress. But that save system is still completely reliant on the number of lives you have in reserve. In other words, once they are gone, so is your save file, your progression, and the precious time you invested. To put it bluntly, you will be starting from the beginning a lot. This makes Congo for the Saturn an incredibly difficult and undesirable affair that will challenge your patience at a level that makes most titles of that era seem like child's play in comparison. It isn't just the issues I have mentioned so far, because you will also face instances of infuriating cheapness from every direction. Late game enemies like the white gorillas that can kill you in seconds, traps that are in place to cause damage in the most cheap and unfair of ways, and of course, the dreaded respawning and hiding enemies that eat away at your precious ammo and ultimately your desire to continue to play this atrocity of 5th generation game development. I want to be clear that I'm not some guy that played this for 15 minutes and came away with an unfair judgment that didn't consider late game content. I paid $50 for this when it came out, played it for many hours trying to find the good, and came away absolutely hating the experience. Admittedly, I would not put myself through that torture again in 2025 if it had not been for the recently discovered cheat codes by my pals over at Sega Saturn Shiro. While that should have increased my enjoyment of Congo by removing many of its frustrations, it instead strengthened my resolve by showing me the late game I never had the patience to see before. I now know that it doesn't get any better, and if anything, only gets significantly worse. A few of the late stages actually require some platforming with this poor control, which had me on the edge of madness after numerous attempts. Even when I cut on the infinite life and infinite ammo codes, which I had only done for a single level, there was absolutely no fun here to be had. This is a game that wastes your time, tries your patience, and leaves you asking yourself, why the hell are you putting up with this when the Saturn has so many better releases? In the spotlight of the genre itself, this becomes an even larger question, as adventures like Power Slave, Alien Trilogy, Duke Nukem 3D, Hexen, and Quake all look and play better. Hell man, I'd rather play Saturn Doom again than be subjected to this turd. Most of the magazines of the day were savage when it came to their opinions of old Congo here. Game Informer minced no words, calling it one of the worst licensed games ever made. Their opinions were actually quite comical, and I recommend you all read it for a good chuckle. Maniac in Germany was also quite nasty to it. Reviewing the US version, they made it clear this was not a good experience. Funnily enough, Game Fan, a magazine I actually enjoyed back in the day, provided one of the only glowing reviews you'll find of this excrement. They spoke of great graphics, deep gameplay, and it being incredibly fun. I am 100% convinced not a single one of these dudes actually played this game past the first stage. Either that or Sega paid the magazine handsomely to give that spectacular review. It wouldn't be hard to convince me that one of the three liked it. There is nothing wrong with liking an unpopular game after all, but you're telling me all three loved it with nary any real criticism, and those odds just aren't likely. In fact, if you look at that same issue, Congo rated nearly as high as Dragon Force, optics that made the publication seem questionable, especially after the Street Fighter Alpha fiasco. In case I haven't been clear or my words not potent enough, Congo is not a good game in any way, shape, or form. It's a shat-out piece of trash commissioned by Sega of America to try and get a popular genre on the Saturn when it desperately needed sales, and it flatlined in every way possible. The European release was cancelled, the press overwhelmingly hated it, and it was yet another black eye in the hearts and minds of potential Saturn customers. There's no question that Sega needed more Western-centric game titles, but instead of shoring up something like its sports branding, a staple the previous Sega console was known for, they were wasting money with this kind of garbage. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.